Welcome to the Emergency Management Network interview series, Leaders and Innovators, brought to you by Buffalo Computer Graphics, DLAN, one unified solution for all your emergency management needs. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on where you are at in this fine world. And today I'm really excited to have the IAEM Region 9 President's Candidates Forum. And we have two great candidates here joining us. We have Dan Scott, who you all know, and John Shear, who I'm sure you all know as well. They're both dedicated to the International Association of Emergency Managers, and they've both been part of the IAEM Region 9 leadership in various different roles. Dan Scott has just recently been part of the higher education leadership side of Region 9, and John Shear has been the Hawaii State representative. I want to bring them both onto the stage right now. Dan and John, welcome. How are you guys doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Outstanding. Aloha.
So, John, let's start with you. Tell me about who you are and your background.
Sure. So, believe it or not, I've been involved in emergency management for about 30 years now. My introduction to emergency management actually started in the military. I was in the active Army for 10 years, and I was trained as a chemical officer, and I had the unique opportunity to get trained as an explosive ordnance disposal tech. So there's only a handful in the entire Army that got that both unique skill identifier of being chemical and focused on bomb disposal. And so I had an opportunity to work with the FBI, work with emergency responders, and go all around the country to respond to weapons of mass destruction. So when I got out of the military, that's what I transitioned into, was consulting, working with emergency responders, federal, state, local level, nonprofits, private sector, throughout the country, doing projects in all 50 states, all the U.S. territories, about 20 different countries. And I've just been fascinated by all the different aspects of emergency management. I focus on natural disasters and terrorism. I own my own company, and we do planning, training, and exercises. And it's just been amazing, all the different types of things you can be working on, from debris clearance one day to targeted violence prevention the next day. It is just an amazing opportunity for anybody to be able to jump into a career field and have that level of variety. So that's kind of what I come to it with, hundreds of hours of training and experience in, incident command, working and deploying to major disasters like Katrina, Hurricane Harvey. I've been an active volunteer with Team Rubicon since 2017, and I'm actually volunteering with them tomorrow with a wildfire mitigation effort that we're doing here in Hawaii. I volunteered with them a couple times for the Maui wildfire response most recently. So really looking forward to, getting this opportunity and, have an opportunity to talk with everybody that's on the call today.
Absolutely. Thanks, John. Sure. And Daniel, please, same question, tell me about yourself and your little bit of your background.
All right, well, thanks. So I started out in emergency management 17 or 18 years ago. I actually started out in emergency response as a educational law enforcement, and from there kind of transitioned to becoming an emergency manager, and just fell in love with it and did a lot of training throughout the country, really building my passion for emergency management in the training that I was doing through Emergency Management Institute, through EMI, through the International Association of Emergency Managers, going to the conferences, expanding my network, doing training at the Center for Domestic Preparedness, and expanding my network down there. So a lot of the work I did is from my background, from the response and transitioning to EM, was that I got to work with everybody. So getting to work with, you get to work with law enforcement, fire, EMS, your state, local, Fed levels. And I've worked at almost every level except for the federal government. So I've worked from state, county, city, to the private industry. I worked at higher education, city, county governments. And for me, emergency management has just been kind of a transition in my career from the first response to the more of the community service industry over the response type. of industry, of supporting and coordinating and being able to be that individual that supports the first responders and coordinates and trains. And that's where kind of transition to where I'm at now, which is being a community resilience coordinator. So more of a community-focused emergency and disaster preparedness and educational outreach. So I love what I do. I love emergency management. And just to say and add this on, if John wasn't running against me, I'd vote for him.
That's good, Dan. That's
Strongest
awesome.
opening statements I've ever heard from a candidate. Thanks for your vote, Dan. Appreciate it.
John,
I think I did the same thing last time. I think we decided whoever was voting for a president, we voted for each other. So
that makes sense. Yeah, absolutely. So, John, why do you want to be president?
Sure. Appreciate that question. So I did live on the East Coast for a number of years. I moved to Hawaii in 2010. But for 5 years, I commuted back and forth from Baltimore to DC and worked at FEMA, worked at DHS headquarters. And one of the things I constantly saw, whatever the project we were working on, was there was this hyper focus on DC-centric issues. And there was this lack of awareness and knowledge of what's happening in the regions. That's gotten better over the years. In the last 20 years or so, I think, regional preparedness coordinators and kind of a real empowerment to the regional administrators to do more at the FEMA level. But it's still a challenge. And so I see this as a really good opportunity to build on the strong leadership that you had, Todd, with your Region 9 leadership team to continue building on your accomplishments. I really look at this as an opportunity to address a couple key things. One is membership. I mentioned I'm a volunteer at Team Rubicon. I heard a great, acronym the other day, STT. It's the same 10 or 20 volunteers that are always doing everything. And so the idea is there's, 600 plus some members in Region 9. How do we get them to participate in the Region 9 symposiums? I went to the one that we did a few years ago, thought it was fantastic. So I want to look at what are the ways we can increase membership engagement to make sure it's not the same 10 or 20. Other pieces are professional development. One of the main reasons I joined IEM is because of the training opportunities that are offered through the annual conference. I think I've been to over a dozen of them, and it's always amazing. I know, Todd, I met you at one of those and kind of talked about your podcasting effort. I was before the FEMA Executive Academy, and we met there. But the whole point is you're getting this professional development experience to take it to the next level. And I find it's incredibly valuable to provide that to IEM members, but I don't think enough of the members take advantage of that. And so getting more members to look at those conferences, whether it's the annual conference, the mid-year conference, the Region 9 symposiums, to participate so that Region 9 is well represented there. And then, the last piece is the networking opportunities. After the Maui wildfires, I was, got tons of calls, Todd, other members of the leadership team. How can we help? What can we do? And that's built on these relationships through IEM. And so we would have someone that just experienced as an experienced emergency manager from California, has lived through and breathed through wildfires and able to jump on and say, hey, how can I help? What can we do? And it's those professional networking opportunities that are there that I think is really valuable. So it's building on the networking, making sure that we're using technology so that we can pull those members in and get them engaged.
Thank you, John, for that answer. Real quick, Susan asked if we're recording today. Yes, we are recording this, and it will be available on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube as well. Thank you for that question, Susan. Dan, I want to ask you the same question. Why do you want to be president?
Well, ultimately for me, it's about, and John mentioned many of the same things John mentioned, which is ultimately for me to be the president would be the aim to actually drive commitment levels, to increase the level of participation and engagement, and the consistency in which we reach out to our members and that we engage with them and we ask for their engagement. I think one of the things that I really would want to bring if I became president is more of the idea that it's not just an idea, it's more of an action that we need to take as a community, as a region. I know a lot of emergency managers that we feel, like you said, there's 600 600 different members in the region of Region 9, and we have a commitment of very few of them that actually engage on a regular basis. So my goal is to becoming president would be to come in and actually increase that engagement, but have it consistent. The Region 9, having people participate more in the Region 9 symposiums or the forums or the trainings that we provide, that would be amazing. But it's more of the engagement in general overall. I mean, I don't want to just see them at the Region 9 symposium. I want to see them at the national conference as well. When we go to the conference, we have, and it's growing, which is amazing, our Region 9 membership, where we go to the conference, we have our breakout and we get in there. And it went from my first year in there of having around 20. So last year we had over 100. So that's amazing. But we have 600 people that you mentioned being in part of Region 9, and we have 100 people going to the national conference or actually attending the national conference or the Region 9 committee meeting and to hear what's going on in the region and what we plan on doing. So my goal is to increase that consistency of the participation and actually have people participate instead of just being a part and saying, oh, I belong to IAEM, or I'm a CEM, or I'm getting my AEM. No, participate in the process, actually contribute to the profession. And that would be my goal as president, is bringing that out of people in a consistent manner.
Thank you, Dan, for that answer. Hey, everybody, real quick, I also want to say you can, in the chat, wherever you are watching this, whether it's YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn, you can ask questions, and I should be able to see them pop up in the comments if all the technology is working correctly, but you know how that works. But if I see your comment or question, I'll for sure bring this up to everybody and have the candidates answer those questions. All right. So, John, next question is for you. It's what do you bring to the table if you become president of IAEM Region 9?
Thanks, Todd. Hey, the question that came up is, are you taking questions from the audience? So I think you answered that. Good job.
Answered that.
Yeah. Check. All right. So not only am I familiar with these type of technology platforms, so I think one of the things I bring to the table is just the involvement that I've had with IEM. I have been on the conference planning committee for, I think, over a decade. I've been involved in emerging technology caucus for over a decade in leadership roles. I think it allows me to have this network within IEM that definitely helps, so that we're able to raise issues beyond, what's happening in the region with the national level. So, having worked with a lot of those other members and other projects and within IEM, I think that definitely helps. I mentioned I worked on projects in all 50 states to include, all the states within the region. I've done territory-wide hurricane exercise for American Samoa. I've done planning and training with Guam and CNMI. I've done, planning, training, and exercise work, HCEP certified, I'm a command system instructor. So I think I understand all these different type of elements that emergency management is engaged with. And just because of my work, we get to work with a lot of the different sectors. And so we might be doing an oil spill response exercise, and then we're also working on pandemic planning, or we're also working on hurricane efforts and hurricane planning or debris clearance, that type of thing. So I think it helps to have that kind of knowledge of crossing all the different sectors, to include working with the education sector and doing kind of operations planning. I actually work with FEMA and National Continuity Programs Directorate on site. And so having, level 1 COOP certifications and understanding what those requirements are, I think definitely helps. And, bottom line is, I like to be engaged when I take on these leadership roles. I was a past president of the Emergency Management Professionals of Hawaii here in Hawaii. I like to set up really strong networks within those organizations that leave it for the next person. So sometimes you start these positions and it's like a blank slate. It's like nothing ever happened. Even though the position's been around for 10 years, you're like, all right, where's all that information? And it's trapped in a Google folder that was lost years ago and nobody has access to. So I like to really set those procedures up in place. And I think I've got a good eye for detail to do those type of things because I've had the experience of doing it before, whether it's, working on websites or refreshing things. That's one of my pet peeves is, I really I'm kind of frustrated with the IAM website, honestly. There's just so much out-of-date stuff that's on there. I think that's one of the main things I'd like to do is re-energize and make sure that the latest and greatest information is posted there for the members.
Absolutely. Dan, same question. What do you bring to the table?
For me, more of a simpler answer, and it's basically just my desire, my passion for emergency management, and to be of service. So for me, since I decided I really love, fell in love with emergency management, I wanted to do more. And I've got my podcast, I do the summits, I do webinars. I've created a network of relationships, and so I have a desire to bring that to a bigger level with IAEM Region 9 and to IAEM as a whole. So my goal for me, what I bring to the table is just that passion and that desire to be of service at that level, and to ensure that we can ultimately we want to encompass that level of service, desire, and passion with all of its members, right? We don't want, my goal is to bring that out of people. So hopefully my passion and my desire and the relationships I've built will lead into kind of being contagious to bring that passion and desire and that ability to contribute and actually contribute out of the members of the region into the members of the IAM in its entirety.
So you want to be the COVID of IAEM.
You know what? Yeah, I will. Just so you're aware, I'll point this out too, is that, one thing I am is a learner. I'm very coachable and I'm a learner. And one of the things that I've been doing over the last few years is I've been studying a complete new processes and system around communication, around interactions, negotiations, involvement, and contribution, and human behavior. So I've been learning all these things in all the ability to help myself. Obviously, I have a demeanor that is not the most approachable demeanor. So I have how do I make myself more approachable? But how can I talk with people, and how can I get people to talk to me? It's a skill that I've developed and continue to develop so that I can do just that. I can actually contribute, engage, know how to write, know how to market, know how to communicate at a higher level than I have been in the past, so that I can get that level of engagement, not just for IAEM Region 9, obviously, but for the community in which I serve. How do you get that? How do you bring that out of people? So it's a level of continual learning as well. And I feel like if we could bring that and incorporate that into the region, into IAEM overall, and into the individuals that join IAEM and IAEM Region 9, that we could be a much stronger profession.
Absolutely. Thank you for that answer. So we have an answer. We have a question from Brian Colburn, and he asked, "How will you address mental health needs in both emergency management and disaster survivors, giving IAEM's commitment to professional development?" And John, go ahead and take that question first.
Okay, because I lost the coin toss, I'm going to get every question first. I got you. All right.
No worries. I'm okay with that.
I like that. It was a good flip. That's all I can say. I think it's a really good question. One of the projects I was just working on was with the Chamber of Commerce Foundation, and we were working with 100 small businesses in Maui that were impacted by the wildfires. And we found it incredibly challenging to get them engaged because they were still going through trauma. And this was a project that started, 9-10 months after the wildfires. And it's something that I think the program developers don't necessarily even realize. They just, it's a program, everybody's going to be engaged, everybody's going to be focused, we're starting at 8 o'clock sharp and those type of things. And I think you need to plan efforts realizing the impact of trauma that's out there and taking a step back. And so that's one of the things that needs to be involved in a lot of the efforts we're working on. What's happening with the Helene, what's happening with Milton, any of these recent disasters, we need to build those in. One of the other efforts I'm working on is at the Adult Mental Health Division here in Hawaii, the Department of Health. It's trying to look at how can mental health providers get more engaged and help out with these efforts. And so we don't see a lot of mental health providers necessarily as part of IAEM. And so what are the things that we could do to engage them and realize that they have a role to play and help us out? So that might mean a combination of providing professional development efforts, and also maybe even developing networks and sounding boards for people so they're aware of the resources available through the mental health channels, crisis lines, and things like that of issues.
Dan, same question.
This one is a very good question, and thank you for it. It's one, too, that we're hearing a lot more of, and there's a lot of generic answers out there. People, if they think, they hear it, and they're like, what are we, we're addressing mental health. But what are you really addressing? And I think the main part is, and we've seen some studies come out of this even in the recent years, as it relates to emergency management specific and disaster in helping those in mental health who have experienced disaster or who work through disaster. Because even the emergency managers who work disaster, we see death and destruction all the time, whether it was us it was our loss or not. One of the things that I've been really working with a lot is the implementation and really understanding of emotional and people intelligence, but how that empathy really brings it all to fruition. How you can understand. It's not sympathy. It's not I feel sorry for you. It's really trying to understand how they feel so that you can help them and understand where they are. But all this boils down to a level of says professional development. Well, that brings to a level of education. And I think that bringing that level of awareness and education into the field is what's important. It would be great if we could have healthcare providers out there and that could provide that level of service. But the fact of the matter is there's more of us than there are of them. And if we educated ourselves and we got education on mental health first aid, and we understood empathy, and we understood how to communicate with people on a deeper level, and we understood people and what they're going through and how they're feeling, and what resources we can give them and how we can interpret that from what they're experiencing in that moment, I think it would be a bigger step forward, not only for our own mental health as the individual responding to that or being amidst that, but to the mental health of those who are being affected by it, who actually are losing their homes or lost a loved one, who lost their property or their livelihood. It's understanding and having that foresight and that education to understand what they're going through and how to get them the resources that they need. A lot of that is just kind of left as an afterthought because we don't understand it. And this is for first response as well. We got first responders and a big push right now to get first responders that level of training. And there's also another push on the complete other end to have, social workers and mental health professionals as part of first response as well, so that you can have those people on site. But the just fact of the matter is not enough of them. But we could be trained to do it in a level in that moment to get them to the next level where they could actually be treated.
Thank you, Dan, for that answer. Keith Harrison asks, not in Region 9. Thank you. Nationally, though, there has been some issues with transparency and inclusivity. How will you address this? And John, you go first on that answer. Oh, wait. Okay, you're on. Okay, there you go.
Yeah, thanks for muting me. I appreciate that. I always forget. No, it's a good question. I mean, I think it's a really hard thing to answer. I know Carrie, and I'm not sure if you had a chance to take a look at the President's Corner message that she put out. It was 10 pages that talked about these issues and the challenges that the organization has faced. I thought she laid out a really good explanation of what happened over this past year or so, what some of those concerns were that was being raised by the membership, and a commitment to do better. I don't think that we can afford to have backroom conversations that are not shared with the membership. And so that is something that, I think, Todd, you're going to play a key role in that, is to being able to help us out and make sure that we're in a loop some of these discussions. And then as the president of Region 9, being able to be a voice for that. And so it is something that members need to know about. They can't be hidden efforts. So the quicker we can get the word out to people, the more engaged we can make, and then meeting them where they're at. I don't know if social media is the best place for a lot of these discussions. I do think it's best to have these within forums where it's a little closed environment. So it's the members talking to each other versus talking to the entire world. And so what I'd commit to is having those type of opportunities, whether it's newsletters, dispatch bulletin, any of those type of things where we can provide a voice and raise what those issues are, making sure that people are heard and that those are addressed.
Thank you, John, for that answer. Daniel, same question.
I think it's a level for us anyway, from what I would be doing, and I'm doing currently. I would just do it at a different level as the president, which is being more intentional and proactive about it. It's not shying away from the conversation. It's not shying away from the topic. Getting involved. If you really feel like you want to make a difference, then you should be getting involved in the process and actually be proactive and productive versus just a voice in the background, which we all know we have some of those, especially in this organization. It's be proactive, actually taking a role to get to the bottom, having the open discussions, not being afraid of them. I mean, I'm sitting on the diversity inclusion committee right now to review and come back with suggestions for the organization as a whole. But more than that, I mean, I sit on other DEI or JEDI or JEDI, depending on how you pronounce it, committees, and give input and stuff like that as well, as far as the training goes and the curriculum. It's one of those things that it's never going to go away. So we have to incorporate it in such a way that we're not trying to hide anything. We're being very transparent about the processes that have taken place, how we're incorporating. It goes back to, as well as I mentioned, there's a lot of catchwords in our world today, and we don't want it to become another catchword. Diversity is another catchword. We want it to be a proactive towards growth word. Like when you hear it, it means something. It's not just another word that's out there because we're trying to play whatever game is trying to play. It's not about that. It's about real action. It's about real change. It's about real proactivity. So my goal would be to continue the drive forward, continue the conversations. I agree with John 100%. It should not take place on social media whatsoever. It should be in a forum just like this, where you can actually have that back and forth. You can hear from different people, and you take a lot of that anger out of the room as well when you can't just type it and go away. You have that, those instigators, and I've actually on instigators in general. There's a lot of instigators out there, and it doesn't take very many to really create chaos. And my goal is, if we create that transparency and that willingness and that openness, there's nobody that can instigate and create that chaos, because it's all out there and it's continuous. And that brings that level back to, as I mentioned earlier, consistency, which is also lacking in many different organizations, not just IAEM, but we need that consistency to keep that conversation and that debate and that ultimately topic growing and evolving all the time. There's no finish line. Just like when we do our plans and we do our disaster planning, we say they're living documents. There's no finish. It's never finished, because things change, things happen, laws happen, all these other things that we need to be able to adapt to that. Semper Gumby, right? And that's freaking EM. And that's how we should be moving forward when it comes to DEI or JEDI.
Thank you, Dan, for that answer. I do have this is a personal question, I guess, coming from me. So one of the things that I did when I became president of Region 9 is I wanted to make sure that we had outreach and at least a place for people to come get information, which is one of the complaints that we've had in the past. And I created the Region 9 newsletter. Are you guys committed to continue the Region 9 newsletter in that form, or any other form for that matter, but in a format similar to what we're using today? What is your role, or what is your goal into how to communicate with the region? It's a very vast region, as you know, all the way from the Pacific Islands, Hawaii, Nevada, Arizona, and California. How do you reach each one of those? John, your question first.
Sure. It is a huge challenge to make sure that you're getting the word out. So I like the idea of the newsletters. A lot of the challenge of these efforts is it requires content, and we're all volunteers. And so that's one of the things it's a big ask to go to Nevada or to go to, California or whoever and say, hey, can you guys provide some input on things that are of interest for the members? So the way to typically tackle that is you get into a rhythm and you say, hey, first week of the month is going to be ideas for what needs to be included. Second week you're drafting, third week you're publishing, and you're pushing out the door. So you can make it routine and repetitive. I think AI does a great job of being able to at least help to get the first cut in there. And so I think it's going to be leveraging some of the tools that are out there to speed things up and to make it easier to not only get the message out about what some of these ideas are, or what's happening in the communities that are of interest, but also to see what the engagement looks like. I used to use a tool called Mad Mimi, and when you would send the newsletter out, you could see who read it and who opened it, who highlighted things, who clicked on links. And so that level of engagement, I think, is going to be important to know where you're seeing people. So a lot of this is setting up metrics of engagement from the get-go. So we were talking about 600 some members. If 50 members open the newsletter, is that what we're looking for? And so I think that's building upon what you've done.
Dan, go ahead and answer the same question.
Well, I mean, 100% agree that with John, but also, I would definitely continue it. If anything, I would scale it up. I think we need to engage more, and the odds are, looking at the numbers, and I've been, like as I mentioned earlier, been doing a lot of studying, especially as it relates to marketing, email marketing, social media, all these things to get communication out there. And ultimately, the numbers are just really low on the level of engagement because people engage in so many different varieties of ways. So they may sign up for an email newsletter and never open it because they just signed up for it just because they were interested at the time. Well, they engage more on social media, or they might listen to a podcast, or they may look at a webinar or a forum like this more than look at that email or look at social media. So I would scale up on the level of engagement and where we are engaging, but be more strategic about that. Understanding that, if we hit 25% of openings in an email, that's freaking good. You know what I mean? Like that's actually really, really good. But how many people are actually, when they open that, are clicking on the links, are engaging in those links, are actually doing the things that we're asking them to do, or reading things, or looking for or getting the resources that they said that they wanted, and understanding, okay, how are we engaging them with turning that into the podcast or the webinar or the social media so that we can try and eclipse the level that we've reached in the past. The level is to evolve. I mean, with the ultimately the implementation of the newsletter is a huge step forward. But now, what do we do with that? And we got the podcast, and how do we bring that, get that in front of more people or more people's ears? So I would actually absolutely increase that, and then ultimately expand the level in which we are doing things. And that doesn't come from just, like John said, we're volunteers to do this. It's a volunteer for us to come in and actually give our time. But it's boils back down to that contribution I mentioned earlier. I want more people to contribute to this effort. And if I can get more people to write, more people to engage, more people to take part in these activities, it's less on any one individual. But we can reach more and more people.
Thank you, Dan, for that answer. And just to let you guys know, we have about 400 and some odd people. This last was like 425 that opened up the last email I sent out via the Substack newsletter. So I think that's pretty decent as far as that goes. And I appreciate everybody who is reading it. Here's a question from Brian Colburn again. He asks, how do you plan to make the CEM or the AEM programs more accessible and appealing to aspiring emergency managers in this region? Good question, Dan, or Brian. John, go ahead.
Sure. That's another one that's really hard to address. I mean, one of the things is trying to demystify the whole effort. I had some of my staff that were interested in going after the AEM, and they balked at kind of what do they need to do, and they didn't even, like Dan was saying, even open the newsletter, open the email. It's just saying, no, we're not interested. And so part of it, I think, is our communications and outreach efforts and call to action to get more mentors engaged, to let people know that there's help that's out there, to make sure the briefings are updated to describe what the latest and greatest requirements are. What we did here in Hawaii was we would host coffee talks with CEMs, and then basically we'd meet in a coffee shop and then go through the CEM or AEM requirements. And it was a less stressful environment to make sure people understood what the requirements were. It does require some hand-holding to get people through the process. And what I've always encouraged is this mentor aspect, and in particular, setting deadlines. I think it really does help to let people know, hey, here's the deadlines you need to look at. This is the process you need to work through. I think it can be useful to also show what's in it for me for them. This is why you want to be getting the CEM and AEM. This is the differentiator it makes in your career, and this is why you want to have that on your resume. It is something that I'm proud of. I'm glad that I went through that process. I think it does set us apart, like other professions that had that type of certification. I think we need to have more certified emergency managers and associate emergency managers in the field.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Dan, same question.
I think well, for me anyway, in the way, because I've been dealing with this for a long time as well as it relates to being qualified to get the CEM. Being a CEM mentor myself and mentoring many people towards getting that credential, it's more than just whether or not somebody who wants it and knows about it and wanting to go get it. I think there's a level that we really need to look at as an organization that I would be pushing for, which is to reframe or the process in which it to actually get qualified to become an AEM or a CEM. There's other more established, longer written certifications out there that have a very established and very well done system in place to allow for people to get level of credential like the AEM and CEM without having to get a degree. So based on level of experience, based on level time in the field, based on different levels of education and training. And there's one of the biggest things that I know for a fact hinder a lot of people is they don't have a degree, and they don't want to get the AEM. They feel CEM is they're qualified for that, but they just don't have a degree. So it's making that more accessible by level of experience and time on the job, and actually being able to do the job, and really being able to prove that you're qualified to have that CEM or that AEM after your name as a credential. There's levels there that I've seen, and I've talked to many people about this over the years at CDP, at EMI, at the conference itself, and just in general, everyday conversations about expanding the professionalism of emergency management. And a lot of it boils down to why should I have to go do that in order to get this credential when I've been doing the job for XYZ years? And I think there's arguments on both sides of that. And I think the overall system can be revamped in order to make it just as challenging. I'm not trying to make it easier by any means, but it ultimately make it just as challenging as far as the level that you and the education, the training experience to be able to say you have these credentials, but knowing that in other people's minds to say that I can do that despite the degree, and the degree. Ultimately, what it's done in other organizations has just cut the level of years of experience needed, and it carries just as much weight. If you got a 4-year degree, then you have to have this many years. If you don't have a degree, you got to have this many years of experience. I think that would go a long way in increasing our membership and increasing the level of AEMs and CEMs in the field.
Thank you, Dan, for that answer. I want to say one thing to everybody listening. I haven't seen any comments coming in from Facebook or YouTube, and I don't know if the system is not having me see them or if no one's commented in there. If you are in Facebook or YouTube listening and trying to comment, we're not ignoring you. I'm not seeing those. I just want to let you guys know that, and I'm sorry if you're in those platforms. Unfortunately, we're not seeing comments from those areas right now. Last question coming for me today is, what is your leadership style? And John, we'll start with you. Let's see if you're unmute. Yeah, there you. Oh, wait. I can't unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? There you go.
I thought you were going to unmute me. So I thought you said the last question was going to be what's my favorite book, but that's okay.
We'll get there. So this is we'll get to the favorite book question here.
You're good. All right. I feel like my leadership style changes over time. It's definitely changed throughout my career. A lot depends on who I'm working with. I tend to lean more towards a coaching leadership style. I'm incredibly proud of the people that I've worked with over the years, and kind of like Dan's mentioned, when you're mentoring someone, you see them get the AEM and CEM, and they walk across the stage. It's just a fantastic feeling, and so I really like that type of leadership where you're, modeling the actions and then really working with people to mentor and provide feedback to get them to the next level.
Awesome, thank you. And I like the coaching style. It's one of my favorite styles of leadership as well. Dan, same question. What is your leadership style?
I would, ultimately, if I had to put a name on it based off of the names of the actual leadership styles that are out there, it would be more of service or transformational leadership, in ultimately helping others become their best self. My goal is I'm not one that's like, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to do it this way, or there's no other way. It's more of a learning experience. My goal is for them to become better, to learn, and to be able to apply these skills that they're learning in various situations. But more than that, to learn to how to do things with just a little bit of help if needed. I point them in the right direction. I give them that, and then if they need more coaching, more assistance, more hand holding, I can do that as well. But a lot of that is really driven by the individual and the scenario in which we're presenting. I'm not a dictator, although I may look like one. I'm very much a person that likes to encourage people, to help people, to coach people along the way, so that they could succeed. And I just give them the tools, and this basically what we do as emergency managers, right? Give them the tools that they need. We give them the support and the coordination to allow them to do it to the best of their ability until it's time for us to get involved. And that's how I approach my everyday.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan, for that answer. Okay, this is it. All right. Oh, wait. Oh, that was Keith just saying that he had a URL link problem. Thank you, Keith, for letting me know about that. Okay, this is the kind of more of a fun question than anything else, and John kind of alluded to it. One of the things I like to do is I like to read a lot, and I like to see what people are reading or listening to. And so, John, what are you consuming? What book or books or publications are you consuming?
I do listen to a ton of podcasts. Probably what I'm trying to work my way through right now is a book called Happier Hour: How to Beat Distraction, Expand Your Time and Focus. And really, it just talks about the need to pay more attention to how you spend your day. There's a real challenge with doom scrolling, where you just kind of get into the news feeds and all of a sudden an hour of your life has disappeared. So it's a really good book that kind of talks through how to really evaluate and take note of what you should be focusing your time on, and what you enjoy doing to make sure that you're living a productive life.
That's great. Thanks, John. That's an awesome. And what's the name of the book again?
It's called Happier Hour. I'll put it in the chat if I can.
Yeah, perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Daniel, same question. What are you consuming right now? What books are?
It's kind of. I mean, I have so many different things because I am, like I said, mentioned earlier, I'm a learner, and I have student mindset, all that stuff. So I have multiple things that I actually listening to, reading, watching a lot of things. But one of the ones that have become one of my favorite recently is Mindset, the book Mindset, but also the book Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. And it's that book in particular, it's more of a business entrepreneurial type of book, but it really reframes your thinking on how you don't have to do everything on productivity, right? Like it teaches you how, or gives you advice on how you can allocate and your time more correctly and more advantageous to you and the people in which you're serving, and ultimately how you can get other people to come in and help you do these things at where they excel. So it's utilizing people's talents. So I really love Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell. Fantastic book. He's one of those guys that, is a very fantastic businessman, but he's turned coach, and hearing him talk or reading his writings is amazing. He does have a podcast too by the same name, Dan Martell. And then every day, my goal is to, on the way to work, I'm listening or to something, or on the phone with somebody as one of my many mentors or people that I need to get advice from. So, one of the things that I listen to the most on my way to work is a podcast called The Big Deal. And it's about how to reframe your thinking and look at life just a little bit differently. For me, it's not all about EM, but it's how I can apply these new things to EM and what I'm doing every day. So it's really a really good podcast, The Big Deal.
Awesome. I'm going to do this really quick. I'm going to go like this. Oh, there we go. I wanted to bring everybody back in together at one time. And first of all, John and Dan, thank you so much for your time today. And I really do appreciate it. And I really do appreciate the fact that you guys are stepping up to take this leadership role on. It's not done half-heartedly for sure. It is a lot of work when you step into the role as president of a region, more than you'd ever think that it was. I know, as we talked about running, for the position, I was pretty blunt and honest about what it is to run. And again, I appreciate both of you for taking the time to do that. For everybody else that was listening today, again, thank you for your time, and for the questions that were asked today. And please take the time. You guys have all received, or should have received, a ballot in the mail. If you haven't voted already, please vote. I think it's important for everybody in the region to have a voice in what we're doing. Together, we are stronger, and I truly believe this. I think we have a great region here in Region 9. I would have to venture to say probably the best region in the United States, but that's just my personal opinion, and hopefully it's yours as well. And until next time, everybody, please take care, and well, stay safe.
When the sirens scream out loud, we're the voice that breaks the cloud. Heads held high when things go wrong, we'll guide you through its strength and song. Disaster strikes without a sound, chaos reigns but we're